The question is, to answer this segment, is what will or should the Lions do about Aaron Glenn in this offseason? Like, seriously, what will the Lions do about Aaron Glenn? What should they do? Because I'm sorry, I know that this is kind of going to bring up some horrible old memories, but when we had Matt Patricia as our head coach, I know nobody wants to talk about Matt Patricia, but just hear me out here for a minute, folks. Just hear me out here. When Matt Patricia was the head coach of the Lions, we were expecting that we were going to get a coach that could fix the defense. Now, obviously, he never fixed the defense. But if you go back and you check out the years that Matt Patricia was the head coach of the Detroit Lions, his defenses, except for the last defense where he got fired after Thanksgiving when the team was 4-7, those defenses were substantially better statistically than Aaron Glenn's first 2 years as the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. I'm telling you, go back. Go to Pro Football Reference and take a look at the Lions' defensive rankings versus the rest of the NFL in 2018 and 2019. In 2018, the Lions were ranked 16th in terms of scoring defense. They were ranked 16th, so they were an average defense in terms of giving up points. And then if you go, I think, to 2019, I think they were ranked like 22nd, they were somewhere in like either the mid-20s or the low 20s, somewhere in there. But even still, that's better than what Aaron Glenn has done with this Lions team over 2 years as being the defensive coordinator. Because think about it. First year he comes in, he's the defensive coordinator, and this team puts up is the 31st overall ranked defense, like in terms of scoring, in terms of everything else. It's an atrocious defense. It's an absolutely atrocious defense. And so what happens? After that season is done, the Lions make huge investments in the defense. They take practically every single draft pick they have, save 2, which was Jamison Williams at pick number 12, and then James Mitchell in like round number 5 or 6 or something like that. They use every draft pick they have almost, save 2, to improve the defense. They go out and get Josh Pascal. They get Aiden Hutchinson. They get Kirby Joseph. They get Malcolm Rodriguez. They draft Chase Lucas. Blah, 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 blah. You just go on down the line. And practically every single one of those players, save Chase Lucas, has had an immense impact somewhere at some time on this defense. Aiden Hutchinson obviously is the biggest one. Sorry, I forgot another guy, James Houston. Pardon me, James Houston, the problem. I forgot about him. But that's my point. You got Aiden Hutchinson, James Houston, Kirby Joseph, Malcolm Rodriguez. Every single one of these guys have helped out this defense immensely over the entirety of the year. And despite all of that talent that was invested, infused, put into this defense, it's actually currently right now, I just looked at the stats today, the Lions are actually the 32nd ranked defense in terms of points given up, in terms of yards per play. It's actually worse overall than what it was last year. Absolutely worse. So for me, it's like, not only have you regressed from last year in terms of overall standings, you've actually gotten worse than when Matt Patricia was the coach. And it's like, I couldn't think of any time when that would even be a possibility. And it's like, I just asked the question, what will the Lions do about Aaron Glenn? Because sincerely, I don't see Dan Campbell firing him. I don't see it happening. Dan Campbell has got a bro concept, a buddy concept with Aaron Glenn, and I don't think he sees the problem because he can't see any way of firing his friend. So it's like, okay, with that being put aside there, I think the Lions are going to retain him because I don't think Dan Campbell's going to fire him, which I absolutely don't agree with. I don't support. But then after that, you have to ask yourself the question, how much leash, how much rope does Aaron Glenn get for the next year? Because I personally think the Lions are going to do the exact same thing they did last year, this year in the draft. They're going to invest heavily in the defense. They're going to go after defensive tackle for the interior. They're going to go after linebacker. They're going to go after cornerback. They're going to go after a safety. I'm at least thinking that half or more of this draft class next year is, going to get drafted in defense. And Rich says, David, please remember AG is still a first-time defensive coordinator, so we need to pump the brakes and give him time. I understand that, Rich. I do. But at the same time, Aaron Glenn, see, the problem I have with that is that Aaron Glenn last year was hyped up so much as a potential head coaching candidate. And he had 2 head coaching jobs. One of them was with the Saints, and I can't remember who the other one was, but one of them was with the Saints, and he ultimately lost that job out to Dennis Allen. But the point of the matter is that for a guy that all these players, that all these coaches want to say he is the guy, he knows what he's doing, he knows how he's doing it, da-da-da-da-da-da, and then you hear these rumors, and again, I'm not high on rumors, but you hear these rumors that on a plane ride back that there was a 5 to 10 minute heated conversation between Aaron Glenn and the coaches because something was going on. There was some sort of disagreement about what was going on after the game, as far as the scheme, as far as the play calling, as far as execution, whatever the case might have been. I heard that rumor from another Lions podcast. And again, I'm not saying it's 100% accurate. I'm not saying it is anything. But when you hear those types of rumors and you see what's going on, you have to ask yourself the question. You have to sincerely ask yourself the question, is it potentially that Aaron Glenn is in over his head? And I get it, and I know some people are going to be like, well, what about the 6 weeks that we just saw where the Lions had a really great defense? Here's the thing, y'all. Those were 6 weeks. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. 6 weeks does not a defense make on a whole year. Because even though we had a month and a half where our defense was really good, or at least average, it did nothing to change the overall rankings of how bad this defense was for the first 8 weeks. Think about that. Our defense was so bad in the first 8 weeks that 6 solid weeks couldn't change it. That's how bad our defense was in the first 8 weeks. And let me put this in another way, because I put this in a comment when somebody wanted to bring this up. I said, let's suppose that Jared Goff had 6 weeks where he was the best quarterback in the NFL. 6 weeks where nobody could touch him. But then the entire rest of the season, Jared Goff absolutely stunk. He couldn't complete passes. He was throwing interceptions left and right. He was fumbling the ball, blah, 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 blah. How quickly do you think Lions fans would be wanting to get rid of Jared Goff had he pulled that stunt this year? So I get it. Aaron Glenn is the first-time defensive coordinator. I get that. I understand that. But it's like, listen, this is a job where you're constantly readjusting. You're constantly reevaluating. You're constantly finding ways to get yourself better. And the one thing I have not seen a whole lot of Aaron Glenn this year doing is adjusting. I don't see him changing. I don't see him progressing. I don't see him trying to self-evaluate himself to make things better. How many times have we looked at him and halftime adjustments, and he simply does not change anything from the first half to the second half? And we're literally left scratching our heads wondering, what's going on, man? Are you telling me that you just don't think there needs to be an adjustment, or are you blind to it? Solo says Aaron Glenn has got to go. Fresh and Fly says, do you think that Ben Johnson is receiving the same overhype for a head coaching job as Aaron Glenn because of late Johnson has struggled to produce consistent run game? That's actually a good question, Fresh and Fly, and I'm actually going to get to that after I'm finished with this segment, but that's a great question. So here's the thing. In my opinion, to kind of finish off the segment about Aaron Glenn really quickly, if the Lions do exactly what I think they're going to do, and they draft heavy, then what I think is going to happen is they're going to keep Aaron Glenn for another year. And here's the thing. If Aaron Glenn, after 2 defensive heavy drafts, and he cannot seem to get this defense at least to like an average defense after 2 heavy drafts, after 3 years being the defensive coordinator, he absolutely has to go. I'm already on the boat where he has to go myself. But if after 3 years as a defensive coordinator and 2 solid defensive drafts where you get some top defensive talent and you infuse it in there and you still can't fix this defense, he has to go. Like if Dan Campbell won't fire him, then freaking Brad Holmes and Sheila need to step in and be like, listen, Dan, you need to fire him. We're going over your head. That's what I think is going to happen. Because if Aaron Glenn is not fired this year and he continues to do the same thing next year, he absolutely needs to be fired. No doubt about it in my mind.